So I'm supposed to talk about artificial intelligence. And the topic of this today's talk is an old idea in a new bottle or something like that. And that is because artificial intelligence has actually been around for a long time. The idea that we want to mimic the human brain and create machines that work like a human brain is actually a very age-old idea. But it wasn't until the late 2000, early 2000, 2009 through 2012 that some of the breakthroughs in artificial intelligence actually happened, both in terms of improved algorithms, and also better computing power. So access to higher computing power enabled the training of data and all that. So that was the history. What I wanted to talk about is to give you a sense of what I see in today's world where we apply artificial intelligence. But first, I want to take a step back to explain what it is. Because as the introducer said, that I majored in economics and I went to law school. I didn't study computer science. So the way I came to understand AI is how I think all of you would want to understand AI, which is to reduce very complex ideas down to some simple concepts and maybe use some examples for us to understand it. AI is such a buzzword now that people forget that all it is the work that goes into making the machine behave like a human being. So what does that mean? For example, human beings have eyes, ears, sense of touch, sense of smell. And in today's world, some of the most exciting and advanced work are in the area of computer vision, for example, which is your eyes. And also in the area of voice recognition, which is giving the computers a set of ears. And today with the prevalence of sensors, all the things, all the, the devices in your homes all have sensors. They pick up the temperature and things like that. So all of a sudden, computers can have a sense of touch, a sense of smell even. So basically, what's happening is with cameras, sensors, voice recognition technology, the machine becomes almost like a human being in terms of absorbing data from the outside world. I used to think that after I graduated from university, I stopped learning. But that's not the case, because every day, through my eyes, through my ears, through talking to people, having an exchange, I'm absorbing new information and new data every day. So you're learning every day. So think of a human being, even if you're in your 80s, 90s, you're well into your old age, you're still learning because you're absorbing information from the outside world. And that's exactly what the computer is doing when we talk about machine learning, because we now have the capability with camera sensors to extract data from the outside world and train these computers to think. And at the end of the day, the algorithms that the smart scientists create, they're just like formulas, create basically a sense of what is in your brain, right? It is, the algorithm processes all the data, and then you have some kind of output that comes out. So that's basically what it is. I wanted to give you a couple of examples of how artificial intelligence has evolved. Again, in the layman's terms, the way I understand it is there's really 3 stages of machine learning, if you will, when machines learn how to behave like human beings. The first thing is very simple. It's the if-then statement. If A, then B. So take an example. If you want the machine to recognize photos of human beings, and the task is to teach the machine to recognize whether the photo is a man or is of a woman, then you could put in some if-then statements. So you could say something like, generally, if that individual has long hair and maybe long eyelashes, softer lips, then it's a woman, right? If, then. Of course, you're not going to be 100% accurate because there's always going to be exceptions. That's kind of the first stage of learning. But then, at the next level, a lot of researchers have advanced that into a much higher form of computer thinking and ability. What they do is they say, okay, I'm not going to dictate whether a woman means long hair or lips or how the eyelashes look. I'm just going to identify a photo and just say that's a woman and that's a man, using human beings to first label the data, label these photos, right? And then you just feed the, so you basically think about it from a logical process standpoint, you are giving the computer the end result first, and then the computer will learn what are the inputs automatically to this end result. So once you feed the computers maybe 1 million photos, 1 million men and 1 million women, I think the computers can get pretty good at identifying what are the traits that can tell me with high probability that this photo is of a man versus a woman, right? So that's what we called supervised learning. It's supervised because they're experts first that label the data, whether it's a man or a woman. Now, we get into the next level of artificial intelligence where it's in the area of unsupervised learning. This is where you're not even labeling the photo as either a man or a woman. You just feed all the photos into the computer. And then you just say, the computer, discern any pattern that you see from these set of photos and figure it out. Just figure out what patterns do you see. So lo and behold, what happens is the computers got very smart. The computer came back and said, the question is not whether this photo is of a man or a woman. That's the wrong question. The question is whether the photo is a happy person or an unhappy person, because I see smiley faces versus frowning faces. All of a sudden, the computer acquires even higher level of intelligence, and everybody is marveling at that ability. So this is so what this computer is going through is a process of pattern recognition, because it could, it has we have the computing power now to feed literally, millions and millions of pieces of data into the computer for the computer to really process it, sometimes even faster than what human beings can do. So you wonder why last year a company called DeepMind invented a technology called AlphaGo that beat the human champion in the game of Go. And that had never been achieved up to this point. Many, many years back, the computer was already better than the human brain when it comes to chess. And the reason is why we could solve chess and not Go. The reason is that in the game of Go, there's so many permutations that mathematically it was very, very difficult to train a computer to think and act as fast as a human mind. But now with new technology, with basically tons of computing power, that technology becomes available, and lo and behold, the computer beats the human being. So it's all about having that computing power. And so that's a pretty quick summary of kind of the way I understand artificial intelligence. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing, what Alibaba is doing in the area of AI. I think we're sitting here in the university. There's always a debate of whether we go very theoretical, focus on pure research, or go applied. Apply math, apply science. At Alibaba, we have a little bit of the theoretical approach, but our focus is mainly on the applied side of things. And the reason is, in the internet world, as you provide so many services to users, to hundreds of millions of users, in the context of shopping, buying movie tickets, blogging, watching a movie, all of these activities are very ripe use cases for us to apply the technology. So to give you an example, the technology development that we have now on the shopping platform, so everybody today in China uses a mobile phone to shop. We just went through Singles Day, which is the biggest shopping day in the world, not just in China. But about 90% of the users and transactions are done on the mobile phone, all right? So as I open up the app, everybody shops on the Taobao app. If you're in China, you're very familiar with that. As I scroll down the screen, my activity is scrolling. How fast do I scroll? Do I stop to look at a particular item? That's all being captured by the computer, right? That's data. And we can take your scrolling data to feed into our algorithm so that we can tell you what is the next item that you should see on the screen in real time. This is through a technique called reinforcement learning. And so that's how advanced the technology is. Real-time data, real-time feedback, and real-time shopping recommendations. And the recommendations are very good, very accurate, because you're very likely, when we go through that process of making that recommendation, you're more likely than not to click on the item and purchase the item. And that is direct implication on the success of our business. All right? So that's a very, very important case study. We also have used artificial intelligence in the process of providing customer service. So Alibaba today, our platform on a daily basis gets about over 6 million customer calls. Over 90% of those customer calls, by the way, those are not telephone calls. Those are sent through by the user through instant messaging on our platform through a mobile phone. Over 90% of those inquiries are handled by chatbots, by the machine, all right? We also use artificial intelligence technology in the area of fraud detection. We're one of the largest mobile payments businesses in China. And so it's very, very important that we know who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, and whether a particular transfer of money is real or whether they have nefarious intent behind it. Well, guess what? We have tons of data. We not only have data about the individual, but because we have payment accounts where users send money to each other, we also have created a network, if you will. So everybody hears about Facebook having a social network, right? But in the case of a payment network, because we could capture data about the relationship between different accounts, who sends money to whom, we have a payment net. And being able to leverage that data for the purpose of security, anti-money laundering, and anti-fraud detection and all of that is really, really valuable for us to run our business. So we've been able to use the technology to reduce the fraud rates down to 0.something% of the payments. So that's another example. We are also opening up our technology for other industries. So we may not use it in our own business. An example of using AI in another industry is in the agriculture context. You can imagine if you grow crops over a vast amount of land, there's one of the most important things is to understand whether the crop is growing in a healthy way. How can you tell? Well, you know, you can, well, now we have drone technology, right? So the drones can be in the air, take millions and millions of photos. That's all data. Those photos is all very valuable data points. Over a time series, let's say over a period of, you know, 2 or 3 weeks, then we will be able to take those photos and feed that into the machines for the machines to tell whether the crop is growing normally or not. And that's something that cannot be done by the human being, by the human eye, because humans are not fast enough to look at, let's say, 5 million photos. So with the computer vision technology, we're basically detecting abnormal crop growth and helping farmers to solve, early detection is always a good thing, so helping farmers to solve their problems. And so those are just a few use cases where we're using artificial intelligence. Someone asked me, you know, I like to go to Q&A pretty soon, but I do want to address the next topic, which is someone said, well, you know, if AI is so powerful, machines are going to be so smart, are they going to take over human beings? Are we going to, I mean, I think there's like 2 schools of thought, right? There's, I believe Elon Musk is of the school that at some point, ultimately, the computers will take over human beings. And this whole idea of singularity. Anybody heard of the word singularity before? Raise your hand. Okay. Yeah, so I think singularity, I think, you know, as I understand it, I don't think it's a very technical word. As I understand it, it's the theory that at some point in the future, there's going to be one single computer that is almost like God, because that computer is the smartest of all computers, and obviously much smarter than human beings, and that will take over the world. I have to say, you know, now I'm now not telling you facts. I'm telling you opinion. My personal opinion is I don't believe that's going to happen. And let's just look at the fact that the fact of singularity is actually very strange to me, because theoretically speaking, if you look at 7 billion people in the world, theoretically there's going to be one person that on some kind of measure is the smartest person in the world, right? You could take an IQ test, whatever it is, the members of Mensa. But that person has not taken over the world. So if that hasn't happened to human beings, how is it going to happen to when you know, millions of computers fight each other off for world dominance? I don't think that's going to happen. Then let's address the question of whether computers can be smarter than human beings. Well, here's the problem, and that's why I am a liberal arts major and not a science major. The definition of smart is according to whom? What does it mean to say one is smarter than the other? I'll give you an example. Dogs are very, very smart. And that's because dogs have an incredible sense of smell. So whoever shows up at your house, the dog can recognize who it was, and the dog is also absorbing new data about who that new person, new visitor is. So the next time when the dog sees a person, it'll act in a certain way. So clearly, the dog's sense of smell is much better than the human being. So in one respect, a dog is smarter than a human being, right? We see police dogs all the time at the airport. They're sniffing out narcotics and all that. But does that mean dogs as a whole are smarter than humans? I don't think so. So I think this is when we're taking the kind of computer science logic to the extreme, you get into very difficult logical problems, okay? So that's why I don't think computers are going to be smarter than human beings. Another way we define smart is empathy, is EQ. We always talk about emotional intelligence. I think most of you in the audience are running businesses. You're owners of businesses. You have thousands or tens of thousands of employees. What do you have to do every year? Performance reviews, right? It's the time of the year that I suffer the most. It is very, very painful to do performance reviews because you have to both communicate constructive criticism and also make sure that the person that you're talking to doesn't collapse. Bring a box of tissue, right? And that kind of interaction, so in the future, if a computer, I don't care, the computer may be my CTO, but if the computer can be my CEO, then I'll believe it. And I don't think that's going to happen in our lifetime. Just that having that empathy, having that emotional intelligence element in a computer, we haven't figured out how to build that into computers. So that's the reason why I think human beings are going to be strong. And the other thing is, I think studies show that we are probably using like 10 or 20% of our brain power. So here's the problem. We don't even know how smart human beings can get. So how can we say that the computers will be smarter than human beings? Anyway, that's my speech. And I hope you still have confidence in artificial intelligence because it can do a lot of good things, contribute a lot to society. And I'm happy to take questions. Varun. By the way, Varun and I both went to Yale, and this past weekend, Yale just beat Harvard in football. I'm sorry, I have to apologize to our hosts. I'm sorry.
And won the Ivy League title outright. Thank you. Joe, thanks for your comments. You described the capture of data, right? And there's so much data being created and captured, compared to history, it's just mind-boggling. While you're able to capture all that data and you are in your own home country, all is good. Alibaba has started to do things outside China in a lot of countries. What can you do, to make host governments, et cetera, comfortable that the data of their citizens, et cetera, is being used, carefully, et cetera, because this is a source of paranoia. You're going through the approval process for MoneyGram, and there are other things on the horizon. So this must be an issue that you think about a little at Alibaba. Thank you.
Sure. I think this is an issue we think about a lot. But let me just say this. We're not the only people that are in this problem. American companies also are under a lot of pressure about the amount of data they collect. Just think about you buying things on Amazon. They know exactly what you bought for yourself, what you bought for your grandmother. They actually know where you live and where you work because your delivery address is likely to be one of those. So they have a lot of data on you. Facebook has tons of data on you and your friends and how you are all interconnected. So this is not just a Chinese company problem, but I think you're right to point out that as a Chinese company generally get a bad rap when it comes to privacy and security concerns. I just like to say that there are really two intertwined issues. One is security. How good is your technology? How good is your system to counter any sort of cyber attacks? And that's an area where Alibaba is very, very strong because we are in the e-commerce business. We're in the payments business. It's all mission-critical type of operation for our merchants that are doing business on our platform. So if our servers went down because people are attacking us, or if there's a virus that came through. It'll disrupt trade. So for us, security is just mission critical. The other issue is privacy, and that really depends on the standards, the ethical standards, the moral values of the people that are having custody over data. So we will never sell data. I think a lot of these internet companies are of the same mind that they don't sell data to third parties. But they're using data to better improve their own business and even expand into adjacent areas because the adjacent area will have the same set of users and the data about those users will be valuable. And I think that's how companies generally draw the line.
Yes, thank you. I wonder if you could say a few words on artificial intelligence and caregiving, particularly of the elderly. That's been a lot in the news a lot lately. Robot caregivers in Japan, now spreading to other places in Asia, as well as North America and Europe. So just some of your opinions on that.
Yes, yes. I'm glad you asked the question because I think in the process of caregiving, there's a lot of care. I mean, the care provider, the giver of the care, has to spend a lot of time, energy, and it's very time-consuming. And you say, okay, all that labor could maybe be replaced by robots, right? So I think that's the positive thing. But I think the downside of that is, I talked about empathy. I talked about sort of having that emotional intelligence. So when you give care, it's a very, very personal matter. It's human interaction. And I'm still waiting to see a robot that can sort of give care with, like human beings, give care with lots of empathy. Moses?
In the financial services, AI, trading is really growing very fast. Predictable, probability of predicting the right answer, getting good results, have always been somewhere around 50 to 60%. I'm not sure if I'm right, but from what I've seen, do you think there's opportunity that could go beyond much higher predictability of outcomes?
Yeah. Predictions go wrong for two reasons. One is the algorithm is not as good as it should be. The second reason is that the data set is wrong or just not enough. And I think in the future, people are now a lot more conscientious about capturing the right data. And also storing the data, right? And sometimes when you capture data, you don't necessarily use it the next day. It's got to be stored somewhere, but it has to be sort of live. Once you burn data on a disk, it's useless. So the technology that's required to capture and store data is now very well advanced. So I think that will improve. I think the algorithms will also improve. But then there's a third reason why predictions are wrong. You are always, when it comes to financial markets, you're always looking at the rear view mirror. And people used to think that black swan events happen once every 100 years. But now we see a black swan event maybe like once 10 or 15 years. In fact, some people have predicted that 2017 was one of those years that something bad will happen. We've seen, just in my own career, I've seen the Asia financial crisis that precipitated with the Thai baht going loose in 1997, and also the whole internet bubble crashing in 2000, and also 2008, the global financial crisis. So who knows when the next crisis will come? And predicting sort of black swan events is almost like investing in banks. We have experts, Liu Hangzang, here about banks. My philosophy about investing in banks is they're good investments, they're profitable, banks are profitable until they're not. because you have to evaluate banks over a whole business cycle, and most people don't have that patience to wait. So I don't know. The answer is I don't know.
Joe, I'd like to ask you a question about the new retailing. You know, everybody knows that the world is heading towards an amalgamation of online and offline retailing into something a lot of people call omnichannel. Everybody, you know, really talks about and predicting that this will happen and happen very quickly. I know that, you know, Alibaba have taken a lot of initiatives, and congratulations on your most recent acquisition or major investment. You know, I think the hypermarket industry, I think, is also ripe for, you know, sort of conversion to omnichannel. Can you give us your vision of what that future model might look like when it becomes omnichannel? Can you paint a vision of how you would envision it for the business and also maybe for the consumer, in terms of consumer experience?
Yeah, we all understand it as omnichannel, and that terminology comes from the seller's perspective. If I'm the merchant or if I'm the department store, I want to have multiple channels to reach my consumers, right? That's from the seller's perspective. When we think about new retail, we're looking at it from the consumer's perspective, because nowadays, in the China context, I think China is a little bit unique in that way because most people are using mobile phones to do e-commerce and do everything else. And in the China context, from the consumer standpoint, a consumer walking into a grocery store will have multiple needs and multiple demands that require what we call a new retail solution. I'll tell you what I mean. Let's say you're at work and then it's lunchtime, so you go to a City Super or Great or one of those supermarkets, and you're there. You want to just pick up a lunchbox and bring it back to your office, right? Something like sushi or something. So that's one use case, right? You're buying there, you're taking it back to your office, but then all of a sudden something catches your eye. It's the fresh lobsters that's on sale that day. And you say, wouldn't it be great to have lobsters for dinner? But I don't want to take my lobsters back to the office. So you order it for delivery to your home. And then you say, oh, wait a minute, but how do I know if the lobster is good? So why don't I try it? So I'm gonna actually, take maybe half a lobster and ask the chef behind the counter to cook it there for me and taste the lobster. So they cook it right there for you. So with one consumer, one visit to the store, she has 3 requirements. She's buying the lunch, she's asking for delivery, she's also asking for real-time cooking and tasting right there. So that's what we mean by omnichannel. From the consumer standpoint, they have multiple demands in one trip in a particular retail setting. So what we want to do is to establish the new retail outlets that can serve all of those needs, and with very fast delivery to the home, for example. So the next day, if you're don't want to step out of your office, you just order on your mobile app, whatever from the grocery store. It'll get delivered to your home or wherever you are in 30 minutes, and that's the vision there.
I have the mic. So thank you for that very good discussion. And you raised the point about earlier about whether computers or machine are smarter than human, and then the point about empathy. I think for those who are paranoid about computers actually winning the game over human beings, it's not concerned whether the computer has empathy or not, because I think it's always painting a picture that computers are really cold. So, but as computers learn so fast, would there be, in your view, be a chance that they are so good in self-learning, eventually they develop an ambition, right? Ambition to learn even more, and then having that ambition to win over human beings?
I think we're in the philosophical realm in this discussion now. My personal view is that ambition is a very human thing. The computer may have capability to learn more, but the desire to go out and acquire more data, right, and to just to get smarter, it's hard for me to imagine that a computer would have that kind. I mean, you could program ambition into a computer. You could probably program it and to say, hey, the computer will always want to see more data and more willingness to learn. But on its own, it's hard for me to imagine that a computer can acquire ambition just out of the blue. But I think we're kind of in a philosophical discussion here.
Yeah. Hi, Joe. I got two questions. One is related to this topic. First of all, I wanted to see, what's in Elon Musk's mind when he talks about his version of and fear of AI, and what if AI gets into the hands of the criminals, which it will, the organized criminal gangs. And the second question is, your new retail, is that kind of like 河马现象? That's kind of like the new retail model that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that's a relevant question. Obviously, all of us have seen James Bond movies. So when bad people get their hands on weapons and things like that, I mean, we already have those situations in the world today, right? And I wish I was making this speech in the United States. I just wish they would get rid of guns first before they worry about AI taking over the world. Again, my personal opinion. On 河马, you're absolutely right. The 河马 store was set up so that it can satisfy the customer demand in all of those multi-dimensions when the customer visits. In fact, we actually set up 河马. We built the technology system first, and then we build the physical store around it. So the concept, started with an idea, and then the tech, we put in place the tech, and then we say, okay, now let's bring in the architect to do the layout. And that's how we did the 河马 stores. I think time is up, and I really appreciate Victor for the invitation, our gracious host, and I really enjoyed the session. Thank you very much.